Good morning, everybody, and welcome to yet another Desert Island Discs. And the face on the screen sharing this with me will be very familiar to many of you. But I wouldn't ever want to make an assumption that people don't know my very good friend and colleague. So I'm going to ask him to introduce yourself.
Afternoon, Michael. Morning, should I say? Morning, everybody else. Yeah, my name is James. I'm Pioneer Minister in the parish of Wintermore Down and Charminster. Been in Bournemouth since 2005, where we moved across from the glamorous town of Bognor Regis to be here in Bournemouth. Currently locked down with my wife and son, 25-year-old son, who's come back from London to be with us for a few weeks, which is mostly good.
Yeah, it's amazing how grown-up children, when they're in their own rooms, don't seem to take up much space at all. But then when they're all together, take up, it seems, an inordinate amount of space, doesn't it?
And eat an inordinate amount of food.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
They're hungry buggers, aren't they?
Nikki and I are both wincing when the shop is done. Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, so you moved from Bognor in 2005, and we met in 2008.
2008 at
yes,
Sarum College. Yeah,
indeed, indeed. So your Desert Island discs. The normal rules are 8 musical tracks.
I couldn't do it, Michael.
And our other colleague, Reverend Peter Ferber, last week broke the rules and has probably set a trend.
I think he has. Naughty Peter.
But I think for all of us who have a love of music, this is a nigh on impossible task, actually.
Yeah.
So you've whittled it down to sort of a selection of 10 tracks, and then you get a book alongside either the Bible or a notable philosophical book, as well as the complete works of Shakespeare, and then a luxury item that has to be not alive. So
not alive, that's it, is it? No,
alive, yeah, yes. So when I was researching this a few weeks ago, I discovered that John Cleese's luxury item was Michael Palin, dead and stuffed. So there we are. So we'll look forward to yours. So we will begin. Your first track, which is a lovely one from a lovely group. Would you like to introduce your first track?
Yes, the first track is a song called Sunshine on Leith by the Proclaimers. I suppose it's always a tricky one selecting tracks for something like this, because these are not what I would consider the best pieces of the 10 best pieces of music by a long stretch. I've stuck with rock and pop, so we haven't got Wagner's Ring Cycle on here. We haven't got Mozart's piano concertos. There's nothing like that. But these are 10 pieces of music that I literally couldn't go to a desert island for the rest of my life and feel that I could never hear these pieces of music. So Sunshine on Leith by the Proclaimers. I always liked the Proclaimers first time round, but since the film Sunshine on Leith was put out,
I was going to ask you whether you had seen the film.
Yeah, it's as a family, it's our favourite movie. So every time we're all together, we nearly always watch Sunshine on Leith. So we probably watched it 8 or 10 times, and we all sing along. And I suppose it reminds me of sort of family times, and on the very rare occasions we're all in the car together, the soundtrack from this film will come on. So there's a number of standout tracks, but Sunshine on Leith, singing about that part of Edinburgh where my uncle and aunt lived, and I took both of their funerals. It's beautiful countryside, beautiful city, and so yeah, that's it's the number one track, Sunshine on Leith.
Lovely, great start. Thank you very much. On to number 2, a slightly different tune, I think, sort of with this one.
Yes.
It's rather nice because you're not that much. Our ages aren't too different. Some of these are reminding me of my youth.
Well, nearly everything I've chosen is from the 70s, from my teenage years. This is Bat Out of Hell by Meat Loaf. Again, not the best music in the world, certainly not the best rock song in the world, but I remember hearing this first when I was probably 14 or 15, something like that, and just being blown away by how grand and operatic and rude and irreverent the whole of the album is. And actually, with an album like Bat Out of Hell, it's actually quite hard to pick a standout track, which is why I picked the main track itself. I mean, the introduction's about 2 minutes long, for crying out loud. And I took my daughter to see Bat Out of Hell musical last year, and we were 4 rows from the front, which again is ridiculously over the top.
Yes.
Fire and dry ice and all kinds of stuff, and way over the top, but rather marvelous. And it just reminds me of being a randy, lovesick 14, 15-year-old. So yeah, Bat Out of Hell.
Fabulous, excellent. Track number 3.
Track number 3. Now this is a live version of one of my favourite songs. Any of us that remember music from the 1970s will remember "Rumours" by Fleetwood Mac, of course. And it seems to be one of those albums, that one of those bands that, whether you're into pop or rock or classical, everybody loves that period of Fleetwood Mac, or most people do. However, before the classic lineup of Fleetwood Mac, the 5 of them, before they did Rumours, they got together and recorded an album that they just called Fleetwood Mac. And this song, Monday Morning, features on that album. So it's the album before Rumours. It's a song called Monday Morning. And the album after Rumours that they toured, called Tusk, which didn't do quite so well commercially, but they went on tour with it. And so they had 3 albums they were touring. And they were in Japan and recorded a live album. And it started with this track, Monday Morning. And you hear the compere come to the front, and he goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, will you please give a warm welcome to Fleetwood Mac?" And the drummer comes in, and Mick Fleetwood is this sort of clattering, chaotic, loose-limbed sort of drummer. And he kind of lays down the beat. The guitarist comes in, and it's just live rock and roll. And it's really unusual that a live track will be even better than the album track, technically. And the combination of their vocals, Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks, and Christine McVie, you just hear how their vocals just click together. And it clearly wasn't just studio trickery, because it works live as well. And it's just a joyful song. And sometimes when I've got the Monday morning blues, I'll put this on really loud. And it's a joyful, uplifting rock song played live. And I would suggest that when you listen to this one, either put the earphones on or turn it up loud and hear it from the beginning.
Brilliant. And you've got the live version on your Spotify playlist. And the first of 2 references to Mondays, and we'll come to Monday number 2 in a minute.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, that's true. I had not spotted that. Well done, Eagle Eye. Yeah.
And now your next track is, I think, if I'm right in saying, by one of your favourite groups.
Yeah. The Who would be my favourite. Yeah. Well spotted. The Who would be, if I could take the back catalogue of any one group, it would be the Who by a long shot. Seen them live a few times. And this song, again, it's not the best Who track by any means. There's half a dozen outstanding tracks, but it's not the best Who track, but it's the first Who track that I heard. And I think it was about 1979, something like that. And I can remember where I was. I was in Staines' day room at school. I was with my friend Steve, who I saw just recently. and it came on to the radio. And I remember thinking, flipping Henry, that's good. And yeah, I remember hearing it for the first time, and that got me into the Who. I then went and listened to Tommy and all the back catalogue. You Better You Bet was the first single they released that didn't have Keith Moon drumming on, and they had Kenny Jones from the Faces playing with them. He played with them for 2 albums. And for the last 20 years, Zach Starkey has played on the drums, who is Ringo Starr's son. So the Who have always had interesting relationships with their drummers. Keith Moon, the Mad drummer, was the drummer for the majority of their early albums. So yeah, You Better You Bet is fabulous. It's all about teenage sex. It's all about that stuff. And I can remember walking through the village with my mates, singing the words to this out loud with a can of beer in my hand at about the age of 15. And we used to go down to, there was a sort of manor house in our village that had a very, very large garden. And we used to break in through the fence and sit at the bottom of their garden by a little pond and a bird table. It was shielded from the rest of the house. We used to sit down there and drink beer and smoke cigarettes and talk about music. And it just reminds me of that. Just kind of innocent teenage days, and it still gets my blood pumping. So again, another one to play nice and loud. You Better You Bet.
There is, I don't know what it is. It's funny you should mention though about that first track that you either hear or buy, not necessarily the best by any artist, but it does just stick in your mind, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It does. There's way better Who tracks than that. And I almost put one of them in, but I just thought, no, this is the one that takes me back to that moment. It takes me back to everything else they did. And every time I've seen them live, they've played it. So yeah, it sticks with you. And I shall still be jumping up and down to it when I'm Ray Merrick's age with a bit of luck. You Better You Bet. Fantastic.
Fabulous. Track number 5, another artist actually that I enjoy, and it's not this track, but a track that I remember well. So introduce your track number 5.
Well, this is very different. This is James Taylor and Carolina in My Mind. I love sort of early 70s hippie kind of laid back feel stuff. Carole King, James Taylor, Neil Young. I almost put in Harvest by Neil Young rather than this one. So I'm thinking, which way do we go here? But no, I've ended up with Carolina in My Mind. We as a family lived in America for a year, and I travelled out there before and after that as well. And on a couple of occasions we had, Andy and I and the children, when they were very small, Connor was 2.5, Brooke was only just 3 or 4 months, something like that. And we had a big road trip down to the Mexican border, down through Texas. Not Carolina, but it was Texas. And every time you pass through a town, for about 20 miles before and after, you got the local rock radio station on your hire car. So we sort of just tuned into that, and I remember it from then. And it's a song that it's a road song. It's being out on the road. It's the wide expanse of America. There's many of the values, certainly currently with President Trump, that I hate about America, but I love the place and I love driving in America. And Andy and I hope one day to scrape the pennies together to do another road trip in America. We'd love to do that. And this will be the first song that I put on the car stereo when we manage that. James Taylor, Carolina in My Mind.
Excellent. Thank you.
What's the song that you like by James Taylor?
I am now trying to desperately remember it.
How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You?
No, it's not. You've Got a Friend.
Oh yeah, good one.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I don't think he wrote.
Did he not?
Did Carole King write that?
Oh, she might
Or
have
was it
done.
the other way? Or did
And
she do it and he wrote it? Something like that.
yeah, and I'm trying to. Yeah, yeah.
Somebody can text in and correct us on that one.
Indeed.
Yeah,
Yes.
fabulous.
Yeah. Number 6. They sort of they get a bit quieter, sort of bit reflective for a bit now, don't they? So yeah, number 6 for you.
Yeah, they do. This is my family song. This is a song called "Feels Like Home" by Bonnie Raitt, who is an American country singer, and I had a job when I was kind of working freelance for various different charities before I was ordained, and it took me out the country quite a lot. So I used to travel a lot when the children were smaller, and I would always play this when I was coming back home, whether I was on a plane, a train, wherever. I've always used music to either make me feel more miserable when I'm miserable, or more happy when I'm feeling happy. But this used to remind me of who I've got coming home. I can remember being a teenager thinking, will I ever have anyone? Will I ever have my own family, my own kids? Will I ever find somebody who loves an idiot like me enough to settle down? And I still can't quite believe that I've got who I've got, and how much they love me and are committed to me. And this song reminds me of that. There's just a brilliant. It's very well produced. This song. It's very stripped back. And there's a Hammond organ in it, and in the second or third verse, you just feel the Hammond coming through, the vibrato coming through. It's beautifully atmospheric. It's not a very well known song, but I do commend it to you. Feels Like Home, Bonnie Raitt.
Fabulous. And now the next one, if I'm right in saying, I'm just having a look. Yes, this has been sung by a number of artists.
Yeah,
the next one, and I love the version by
Ellie Goulding.
Well, I know. You see, you beat me. I do love that one, and that's from a film that I'd like us to watch for Film Club, or at least I think it is. And then, but actually, one of the nicest versions I have heard was by a few members of the Bellowheads.
That's what this is.
Is this the version I was going to? Because I didn't recognise. Yes, right. Okay.
Yeah, this is the version. Yeah, written by the Waterboys, a song called "How Long Will I Love You." And I suppose if you were going to be a purist, the Waterboys is probably the best version. But you're right, this is a version from the film about the Richard Curtis movie About Time. And John Bowden, who sings it, is the lead singer of the Bellowheads, who of course we've seen live.
Yeah.
And I've seen live with my wife as well. Phenomenal, just phenomenal. It's hard to describe them. To say they're a folk band is underplaying it a little bit, isn't it? They're a folk band with a brass section. Very energetic, very evocative. And this is from a film called About Time, a Richard Curtis movie. It's also the movie, Michael, which this was terrible timing, but the movie, for those of you who haven't seen it, is basically a love story between a father and a son, I think. The son does have a love interest with Rachel McAdams, but I think ultimately it's a love story between a father and son. And you see Bill Nighy and Domhnall Gleeson playing table tennis and all of this. And we watched it the night before Connor left home to go to university.
Oh, crikey.
All five of us went to, because we loved Richard Curtis movies and we'd heard it was good. And we went to the cinema down opposite the Pavilion, as was the Odeon. And all five of us watched it. And all 5 of us were crying. In fact, we were crying so much we were sobbing. When I cry in the movies, I find it hard to catch my breath, and we all go. it was too much, actually. But it's a beautiful movie. We've watched it since, and this song kind of sums up the movie. How long will I love you? And I guess this would be the song for my son, my boy Connor. And when I'm on the desert island, it would remind me of him and being with the family and watching that movie. Yeah. Even though, as you say, the Waterboys version is probably better. Ellie Goulding version is lovely, but this is the one that does it for me, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Fabulous. We're probably going back a bit in time, aren't we, with the next one?
Yeah. The Crystals, Do Run Run.
Yeah.
I love Phil Spector Motown stuff. I've got compilations of all of that. The other one that I almost chose instead of this one was Chapel of Love. But I think I chose this one because it is just irrepressibly optimistic. It's just fun. It makes me feel happy. And I just love the way it makes me feel. The words are nonsense. Yeah. Just a girl singing to a boy, made up words, singing in tongues words. And I just love it because of how it makes me feel. So I've got a playlist on my phone. Sometimes when I'm by myself, if it's a sunny afternoon, I wind the windows down and just play Phil Spector Motown stuff for half an hour until it lifts my miserable mood. So really, this is the big happy song in the playlist. Yeah. And if I'm on my desert island and I'm feeling a bit glum, and I've played Feels Like Home, and I've played Carolina in my mind, and I've got all wistful, this would be the song that raises my spirits and makes me laugh. And probably, I'm not a dancer, as you know. I don't know if you are.
Oh no, I'm not a dreadful dancer.
But I probably would, on my own on a desert island, I probably would have a dance around to this one, and shake my booty and let my hair down a little bit to this one. Yeah,
brilliant,
fantastic,
great. So from a really cheery song to not such a cheery song necessarily, and it was really interesting because I remember this really vividly as a youngster, and I sort of funny how memory plays tricks on you, because I thought, this was #1 in the charts for weeks and weeks and weeks. And actually, it wasn't. It was #1 for 4 weeks.
It felt like years.
Yeah,
at the time.
Yeah. I mean, those were the days when I think people of our generation, I don't know about you, but Sunday evenings and the charts were actually quite a big deal, weren't they?
Oh, a really big deal.
Yeah, and being #1 was a really big deal. Yeah. And I remember the video really, really clearly, and I thought it was a great video. So as we waffling on, your 9th track is
Bing, ding, 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 ding. So I Don't Like Mondays by the Boomtown Rats. It was their second #1. Their first #1 was a song called Rat Trap, which I almost put in. But this was from 1979. I was 14 in 1979. And this was my first exposure. I was brought up in a farming village in Northamptonshire. So everything came to us about 18 months too late in terms of fashion and music. But this was my first exposure to sort of post-punk new wave music. I'd seen a couple of people with the Sex Pistols Tipp-Ex'd onto their school satchels, but that was about it. But my first exposure to that kind of music was the Boomtown Rats, and then I found out about the Undertones. Then I found out about the Clash and the Sex Pistols and a number of the rest of them. What I loved about the Boomtown Rats, though, is that they could play their instruments. They had a fantastic keyboard player who always played in his pajamas, whose name was Johnny Fingers. They had brass section in the band. They knew how to play their instruments. They in fact got bullied by the Sex Pistols and the Clash for being too highbrow. It's hardly highbrow, but yeah, I loved this single, and shortly afterwards, Bob Geldof took the lead in The Wall by the Pink Floyd film. So that interested me. But then, of course, I Don't Like Monday surfaced again in '85 when Bob Geldof organised Live Aid, and the Boomtown Rats played one of their last gigs, although they've got back together again now, played one of their last gigs live in Wembley Stadium. And you remember it when Geldof sang, "The message today is how to die." And the original song is about a shooting in San Diego. But of course, Live Aid was all about Ethiopia. And he just let it hang on, "The message today is how to die." And the whole stadium went quiet for about 5 or 10 seconds. And everybody just made this wall of sound. And I can remember thinking, blimey, this bloke has gone up a level from just being the Boomtown Rats lead singer. And of course, he then became the voice for Live Aid and Ethiopia and poverty and raising money, all of that. However, for me, the tale didn't end there. I ended up working with Greg Valerio, who you know, Michael. He came to speak at St. Luke's a few weeks ago. Greg founded a charity called CRED that worked in Ethiopia, and I ended up as their national coordinator probably for about 3 or 4 years, something like that. But one of our partners in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, one of our partners, an organization called IHA UDP, led by Dr. Jemba, found that the government had sold the land from under them. They were doing community development down in the slums. The government had sold the land from under them to the Hilton Hotel. And so it meant literally their patch of land and everything they would do was going to be leveled. And so Dr. Jemba rang Greg up and said, "Can you do anything? Can you help?" And so Greg rang his friend, Catherine Hamnett, the designer. Catherine Hamnett had just designed some T-shirts for us. And Greg rang up and said, "Catherine, I need Bob Geldof's phone number." Because Bob Geldof was Mr. Ethiopia. Yeah. And she said, "I can't do that." And he's very demanding. He said, "This is important. I wouldn't ask you if it wasn't. I need Bob Geldof's phone number." And so she rang Bob up and all the rest of it. And so Greg rang Bob Geldof, explained the situation, and said, "I need you to do something." Bob Geldof went round to Tony Blair's house. This was during the Labour government. Bob went round to Tony Blair's house. He knew the numbers of every Premier and Prime Minister, went round to Tony Blair's house, who rang up his counterpart in Ethiopia. And a fortnight later, Hilton arranged to buy a different parcel of land in a different part of the city, and the project was saved. Bob subsequently went out there to visit Dr. Jemba and made links with them. When I took Connor out to Ethiopia to visit Dr. Jemba for the first time, they just kind of rolled out the red carpet. It was nothing I'd done. It was all Greg's work. But it was where we learned about community development in terms of the Africans doing it for themselves. Yeah. This wasn't about white man going and doing good stuff to the locals. This was about Africans who'd worked out a model of community development down in the slums for themselves. And it's where I learnt that Christ is in the face of the poor. It's where I learnt about community development. It's where something changed in me in terms of the gospel siding with the poor and the vulnerable. And so Geldof was part of that journey. But then he came and did a charity gig for us. So my job was to host Bob Geldof for the day. And so I drove him and a couple of the guys in his band round. And that was just one of the highlights of my life. Getting to talk about Live Aid, getting to talk, he's remains very close to Paul McCartney, getting to talk about the Beatles, getting to talk about the Who, he's a big Who fan. And talking about talking music with Bob Geldof all around Portsmouth was one of the big highlights. So this song reminds me of all of that. That whole great big story. It reminds me of all of that, and that's why I would like this one, if you don't mind.
And that again, I think that sort of, for those of us who have an affection of music of any sort, it's when music is brought alive by a story or an emotion or a memory or whatever else, isn't it? It isn't actually just about the track, and as you say, there are musically better tracks, but it's about all the emotion and what's wrapped up in the tracks actually themselves. So,
and he's still going for it. You know, there's a new Boomtown Rats album out, which they're supposed to be touring at the moment, and I was going to go and see with my friends Steve and Sam from school. We met up at a funeral just before Christmas, and we arranged that we go together. But of course, because of coronavirus, that's not going to happen at this stage. But I'm hoping that it will happen later in the year. But he's a bit grayer and craggier now, isn't he?
Yes, just a bit. Yeah.
But he's still writing songs and playing rock and roll, which is rather wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. We are going to take a diversion now from music and go to your two potentially non-musical choices. So I sort of mentioned to you earlier that, of course, you get the complete works of Shakespeare and then the Bible or another sort of book of philosophical import.
Is it okay if I don't take the Bible?
It's okay by me, yeah.
I don't think the bishop's watching. I've spent 55 years reading and studying and learning the Bible. And I think I've got enough of it tucked away in my spirit. And besides of which, Jesus is the word of God, not that book that I keep on my shelf over there and dip into when I'm preaching and all the rest of it. So if it's okay with you, I would like to take a collection of Buddhist scriptures with me. Buddhism doesn't have a canon of scripture, which I think is a great strength. I think it was woeful that the church felt they needed to canonize scripture into saying, right, these are our writings that are in and this is out. They did that with the creeds as well, whereas Buddhism tended to be much more open than that. So I'd like to take a collection of Buddhist scriptures. There are hundreds of verses in the Bible and Jesus' teaching that correlate to the teaching of the Buddha. And it's been something that I would love to learn. And so that will be part of my learning and keeping the grey matter going when on a desert island. So that's what I'd like to do with that one. That's right.
Good choice to me. Yeah, absolutely.
What else do you need to know?
A luxury item that is not alive.
Okay. Well, this is musical actually. I would, before I go to the desert island, I would like to go to the south of Spain, and I'd like to head out into the mountains, and I would like to select a handmade Spanish classical guitar. I've still got my Spanish guitar from when I did all my grades and my music degree and so on. It's in a terrible state. The neck's bent. It doesn't stay in tune. So I would love to go out and buy a proper handmade Spanish guitar, and I would take that with me. I can still remember my entire repertoire in my head from my teens and 20s days. And so I would basically get my old stiff arthritic fingers fit again, and I would sit down on a log on the beach and I would play that to my heart's content. But I would need a collection of strings for it.
Yes.
So if it can come with a lifetime collection of strings, I go with that. And you need to know a book, don't you, as well?
Yeah, alongside your yeah.
That's very, very difficult because I've always got a novel on the go. Always. It was a New Year's resolution about 3 years ago to get back into reading novels and not just sort of theology of all that kind of stuff. So I think I would probably go back to. I think I'd probably go back to my teenage years. My paternal grandfather got me reading Thomas Hardy long before we moved to Dorset. And the first novel by Thomas Hardy I read was Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and then went to see the film with Nastasia Kinski in it in about 1980, something like that. And I probably read it 10 or 15 times. I studied it for A level, and I studied it at college as well. So, yeah, I would like to have a leather-bound luxury version of Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy.
Fabulous. Sounds like a good choice. Yeah.
Excellent. I think so. I would. Yeah. Again, there's better novels, but if I didn't take it, I'd regret it. I'd be sitting there thinking, "Oh, damn it!
If only."
I wish I'd brought Tess with me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. And so, to conclude, your last track from an iconic band of time and probably since as well. So please introduce your last one.
Well, my last track is a song called Our Last Summer, and it's by ABBA. It's on the album Super Trooper. And it reminds me of my grandpa, my mum's father, not the Thomas Hardy one, the other one. My mum's father, my grandfather, I was very, very close to. Spent a lot of time with him in my teenage years. It was him I used to take my girlfriends to when I was first starting to date. We'd pop by my grandparents' house for sherry with the grandfather, and he'd charm the bits off them. And yeah, he was rather splendid. He was ex-army, always wore a tie and a tweed jacket. But he was a bit of an ABBA fan as well. And so he had the album Super Trooper, and I remember listening to it at his house. And there's a song on it called Our Last Summer. And every time, it's starting to choke me up now. I'm sorry. Every time I hear it, I cry. It reminds me of my grandpa.
Wow.
And he died when I was about 32. But I can remember in the summers going over there, they had a big market garden. They had fruit trees and all that. And I can remember picking fruit and walking the dog and climbing the trees and chucking the apples down to him and all of that. And this reminds me of Grandpa. But then, of course, along came the Mamma Mia phenomenon, didn't it? And it reinvented ABBA for our kids' generation. Now, being a father of 3 boys, I know the Mamma Mia movies haven't featured highly in your household. But our girls got into the Mamma Mia movies and have seen the show. And along with Sunshine and Leith, when they're back, we very, very frequently watch Mamma Mia 1 and 2. And Our Last Summer is one of the songs on that as well. And there was a Christmas about 3 or 4 years ago when I took the service at St. Luke's on Christmas Day, and then we drove to my parents straight from Winton, straight up to the Midlands, and arrived to them at their sort of mid-afternoon. And we played ABBA all the way up. We played ABBA Gold, ABBA Greatest Hits, songs from Mamma Mia movies all the way up, including this one. And so there had to be something by ABBA on here. I think they're probably the best pop group that I've ever come across. There could have been one of any number of songs. But
is it now who's the composer of them? Is it Benny?
Benny and Bjorn. Yeah, the two boys in the band. Yeah.
And isn't it said that actually the music they composed is very complicated, given what sounds like fairly simple sort of pop tunes?
Yeah. Somebody I knew studied ABBA in their music degree at college. I think some of it is very simple and quite folky. Benny, the piano player, came from a folk background, but some of it is much more intricate, and he's a very good pianist. Some of it is more intricate, and it's just sort of a 3-chord wonder.
Yeah.
At the local vocals, we sing some ABBA. We sing Thank You for the Music. and actually the chords on that are really quite difficult.
Right.
It modulates all over the place. And whenever they spring that at me, I say, "Oh, I need the chord sheet in front of me." It's not a song like When the Saints Go Marching In that you could just play off the top of your head. So yeah, it is musically quite intricate. And yeah, I can remember being in love with the girls from ABBA when I was a kid. I think everybody was. It wasn't just my grandpa.
No.
So yeah, there had to be something by ABBA in there. I'd quite like to have had a couple of albums, but yeah, Our Last Summer by ABBA, reminding me of singing with at home and in the car with the family, and of my dear old granddad.
Fabulous. Thank you for your 10 and your extras and the stories that surround them, as is often the case with really good music and musical choices. So, James Sharp, for your Desert Island Discs, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you indeed. Thank you indeed. You're better looking than Roy Plumley, but not quite as good looking as Lauren Laverne.
I take that as a compliment.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you.